Hi there and welcome along. This is my absolutely stunning agave americana, or the century plant as it's sometimes known, sometimes also called the American aloe. This particular plant is rumoured to take between 15 and 25 years to actually flower and can reach in excess of 12 feet across. These large strap-like leaves often reaching over 12 inches themselves, sending up one singular flower spike which can sometimes be up to 15 feet tall and often killing the parent plant after it flowers. This particular plant is really quite special to me and came from somewhere special, so do check the caption of how I acquired this particular plant. However, it is time for this one to be repotted, and I wanted to bring you this very brief tutorial of how you can handle a succulent like this and make sure that it survives its repotting journey. So let's begin. The first thing that needs to be done is, with this particular plant, is you're going to need some really decent gloves. This particular plant is incredibly spiky. Its leaves are laced with really large barbs. And what I want to do is I want to knock this particular plant out of its pot. We're then going to leave it out to dry and form calluses in the sun. Now, as a normal gardener, this is something that feels very strange, but if you don't do this and you have divided the plant and taken off the pups like I'm going to do today, you can quite often find that not only the pups will rot, but also the parent plant itself will also rot. This particular technique is exactly the same as well if you're going to take pups off of your snake plant in the actual house itself. Right, so first thing we're going to do is we're going to very gently tip this plant out of its pot, get hold of it and just give it a light tug. Right, you can see that all the way round the particular plant, it's got lots and lots of tiny, what we call pups or offshoots. And what I want to do is I want to remove those from the parent, and then I'm going to leave this out in the sun to dry out. Right then, you can see now that I've got the plant out of the pot, you can see all the pups, which are the juvenile plants, around the actual parent itself. And what I want to do is I want to very gently remove these. So I'm going to use a very sharp knife and I'm simply going to tease these away from the parent, trying to keep, wherever possible, as much root with each pup as at all possible. Just sink the knife between the parent and the young plant. You'll feel it go through the root, and then you simply will be able to pull the young pup away from the parent, tease it away, and you can see that that has come away with a nice amount of root. The parent and the pups then need to be left out somewhere to dry for around 5 or 6 days to make sure they form a callus before repotting takes place. The parent, as you can see, has produced about 6 or 7 decent sized pups, and these, along with the parent plant, are now going to be left outside to dry up in the sun for at least 5, 6, maybe even 7 days. Don't be afraid of leaving them up to a week to completely dry out before you actually start thinking about potting them on. Hi there and welcome back. Right, here she is. Been out in the sun for about 5 or 6 days now. That root ball has completely dried up, and all the wounds that were created during the removal of the pups have now formed a callus and dried over. So that's the important part out of the way. It's now time to repot the succulent, and it's going to go into a nice terracotta pot. Wherever possible, succulents should be grown in terracotta pots. They're not only porous, but they also allow the air to breathe and go in and out of the pot as well. Rather than then trying to water this plant from above, I'm then going to, when it completely dries out, take the entire pot and stand it into a bucket of water, allowing the entire plant to soak up a huge amount of moisture at once, and then completely let it dry out in between waterings. The terracotta pot should always have a nice sized drainage hole in the bottom, and then you're looking at adding a nice layer of crocks to the very bottom. Now, this is a collection of stones that I've selected from around the garden during the digging process in planting up different things. It can be broken up terracotta pot, it can be small lumps of concrete, it can be absolutely anything that you've got laying around, but you do need a really nice thick layer of drainage at the bottom. Most important thing is to open up that particle size right at the bottom of the pot, add a nice layer of air, and keep that drainage hole nice and open. Next, we're on to the actual potting media itself. Because the agave is going to spend an awfully long time in this pot, probably around 2 or 3 years, it's going to need something really quite meaty and free draining. So I'm starting with a John Innings number 3, which is a loam-based compost. This is pretty much made out of screened garden soil with a small amount of sand, horticultural grit, and a small amount of organic made up into it. I'm going to take around a third John Innings number 3, and to that I'm going to add a third multi-purpose peat-free compost. This one is actually from Levington's. You can see a really nice fibrous texture. Once again, it has a small amount of gravel added to it. The basic thing of this one is it's actually peat-free and full of organic matter. So we've got 1/3 John Innings, 1/3 peat-free Levington's multi-purpose, and to that I'm then going to add a further third of horticultural grit. You could add sharp sand if you wanted to, you could add crushed eggshell, you could add small amounts of horticultural grit, whatever you want to do, but you do need a really thick and very gritty mix to the soil. It's a mixture of holding water and of course making the water drains out of the pot. So I'm just going to add more, mix those together. So that's a third John Innings number 3, that's a third Levington's multi-purpose peat-free compost, and for myself then it's a third horticultural grit, or you could use, say, sharp sand, or you could, if you wanted to, use crushed eggshell. Your potting mix should end up looking like this, really gritty, quite coarse in its look, but this is exactly what. Now the fun and particularly challenging part of this video. You saw in the first clip that this particular plant is incredibly spiky, so it does need to be handled with the utmost care. Incidentally, if you are watching any other tutorials on the internet, please do not attack your succulents, your houseplants, or any of your other plants with a chopstick. There is absolutely no reason whatsoever for you to attack the root ball of your plant. All you need to do is make sure that if the plant was pot bound, you rub the root ball ever so slightly and encourage the roots to come away from spiraling around that actual the pot shape itself. You don't need to attack it with a chopstick. You don't need to pull all of the soil away. Not all of the media needs to be replaced at this stage. So simply rub the root ball at the stage, if it was particularly root bound in the first place, at the stage before you dry the actual plant out. Now that's happened, I need to start filling this pot. So we're going to give it a nice decent layer of that lovely gritty soil at the very bottom. I'm going to have to handle this one with the utmost care, because I say she is incredibly spiky. She's going to have to go in, and I need to remove a little bit of the soil. That's a little bit too much. Obviously we want a nice gap at the very top of the pot to make sure that if we wanted to, we can dress the pot off with a decorative horticultural grit or stone, and of course that we can add water to the pot as well. So that's just about perfect. So we want that to be around 1.5 to 2 inches deep. I'm then simply going to backfill around this particular plant, and as I say, top dress it with a horticultural grit just to keep the sun off the very surface and suppress the weeds. Good luck with repotting your succulents. I hope you found this tutorial useful. The most important thing for now is to give this a very small amount of water. We don't want to water this heavily, and certainly over the next 2 or 3 weeks, heading on for a month, we really want to make this plant work very hard, which is not the way you'd normally treat a plant once you'd repotted it. You'd normally make sure you watered it heavily to make sure its root growth gets away. With a succulent or a cacti, you really want to make the plant work really hard. A small amount of water now and no water for around 2 weeks. You want to let the plant completely dry out. Once again, sending its roots right down into the bottom of the pot. It wants to search for water, it wants to search for nutrition value from the compost and plunge its roots deep into its pot. And then after about 2 or 3 weeks, you can think about watering it again, and probably leave it around a fortnight before you water it any more than that.